My name's Travis Suit. I'm the executive director and founder for Piper's Angels Foundation and the Crossing For Cystic Fibrosis, Piper's dad. So my daughter Piper was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis when she was 4 years old. She had been sick throughout her infancy with a lot of recurring lung infections and on heavy doses of antibiotics and steroids to combat it. When she was 4, she developed pneumonia, and the doctor suggested that she be tested for other things, and that's when they discovered cystic fibrosis. And it was a heavy hit. You know, it was heartbreaking, it was emotional. It really felt like a life-shattering experience. You know, the dreams that you have for your life and for your children, when they're so drastically shifted in such a short period of time. You know, on one hand, it felt relieving to learn about her diagnosis and to understand how we could address the problem. But on the other hand, it was like her entire future was cast into uncertainty. And that was tough. It was tough on everybody, my family and her mom and me. And it was a few weeks later at her first clinic appointment that we're meeting all the doctors on her team. And at a CF clinic, you have pulmonologists, you have a gastroenterologist, you have an RN, you have a physical therapist, you have a social worker, you have you know, this entire incredible team. And it wasn't until the respiratory therapist came in the room and I was asking, like, what kinds of sports should Piper be in, right? She's 4 years old, you know, should she be swimming? Should she be dancing? Like, what would be best for her health? And they told us this incredible story about how surfers in Australia who had cystic fibrosis were having a lot less lung infections, a lot less hospitalizations, their breathing scores were higher, their pulmonary function. And it was really this miraculous discovery that the ocean has this profound healing effect for people with cystic fibrosis, for their lungs. The salt air, the salt water, the sodium chloride, literally the table salt, right? When we breathe it in, for somebody with CF, because their bodies are overproducing mucus in all of their organ systems, that salt helps to break down that sticky mucus and provide better airway clearance, which reduces the number of infections, keeps the inflammation down, and keeps their lung function high. And so after her diagnosis, you know, it was a really heavy time, and it kind of, you know, in a sense, there was, you know, you felt hopeless, you know, for like what this meant. But this gift of this connection of the ocean to CF was really what was the seed, you know, the impetus for what ultimately became the Crossing and became Piper's Angels Foundation. It was inspired out of that relationship to the ocean.
On an emotional level, how did you feel personally as a dad? How did you face all those challenges?
Yeah, I try to keep my message really simple to my children, which is that I feel like as a man and as a father in the masculine, we have a very simple role, which is to protect and to empower and to love. That's it. And you know, when you're a dad and you feel like that sense of protection that you bring to your children is undermined by something that you can't control, and something that is something that you gave them, right? This is a genetic disease. There is a deep acceptance of that is very difficult to cope with and process. So it was painful. It was hard. It was turbulent. And it was also transformative.
In which way would you say it's transformative? In a good way, in a bad way?
It's definitely transformative in a good way. Cystic fibrosis, Piper has taught me, the CF community has really taught me, and I think it's one really valuable lesson that we all get to learn through this crossing, is that adversity is the starting line for courage. And adversity for all of us shows up in a lot of different forms. And this was how it showed up in my life, in Piper's life, in our family's life. But it can show up in people's lives in so many different variations. And I've never met a human that hasn't experienced great adversity. And I kind of have a running joke with everybody, here I like to mention, which is like, man, did we really think we came here for it to be easy? Like, really? Did we really come here for it to be easy? I don't think so. So I think that the adversity is the opportunity. And it opens the door for that opportunity for transformation. And that transformation, I think, it's a unfolding, or like an infolding of life. That takes us through this roller coaster and this spectrum of human experience, and ultimately can carry us, persevering through adversity can carry us to, I believe, really elevated states of human existence, elevated states of consciousness.
What I understand that what you're trying to do is transform others, and to communicate, and this is what you did this morning. But you're trying to transmit what you learn and make us feel what you've learned as a dad.
I think transmit is a good word, but I don't feel like I'm trying to transform others. I think that the crossing is a venue where we get to witness each other step into courage so that we can embody the transformation in ourselves. Because there's, as much as we might create the invitation and as much as I might get people fired up, ultimately they got to come stand on this beach. Maddi's got to come stand on this beach. Riley's got to come stand on this beach. Blake's got to come stand on this beach and look out at that ocean, which is right now beautiful and crystal clear. But tonight, when they step on that beach, it's going to be black, right? It's going to be an abyss. And they got to look out there, and they have to make the choice to go. And I think we all come to that new frontier of courage in our life where whatever adversity we're facing, we have to bring ourselves to that moment. And that's I think what initiates the transformation. I think the crossing, this has really become, on one hand, a pilgrimage annually for people who love the water to come together in a community, but also too, it's become an initiation. You initiate yourself through adversity. And psychologists like to call this kind of an event scheduled suffering. So we all scheduled it together, right? It's kind of a cosmic joke almost, but I do see it's good to word it that way, to say you transmit, and then you let people transform themselves if they want to, if they are open to, if they are ready for it. And I do see it being inside and following others and following Maddi. I do see it on like the more we approach the day, the more she understands exactly why she's doing it, what is happening, and she's been impacted by that. When at the beginning it could be just, I'm gonna do a crossing of like 80 miles, which is on a sport level because she's like a woman that is like on the water all the time and doing competition and trying to make a living out of it. She's like, this is a good challenge and this is a good cause. But now she's understanding the level of how good that cause is and how important is it to do it, and how the community is around. And
So let's talk about that community. Where is the community at right now, if you have to describe your community?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that's the most beautiful aspect of this whole thing is the community. And like you said, what Maddi's, her journey, and this beautiful opportunity that, that you as a filmmaker, you're a part of that community. And you're sharing her story, but you're sharing our story too. And I think that storytelling is the essence of community. It's like how we understand each other is through our own personal stories. And having repeated the Piper story, our story, thousands of times, it never loses its energy. It almost, in a sense, by sharing the story, it gains something, right? It's like it adds to life. And that's something I've just had to discover for myself, because you would think after repeating something over and over and over, you would just, you'd lose the essence of it. It would just be words, but it's almost like the storytelling charges the consciousness. It charges the community, and the community then can embrace that story, and then it creates a buoyancy. It lifts it, and through that upliftment is really the key to this whole grassroots movement. The key to an organization like ours is advocacy. You need people's voice. And we are not taught how to advocate. But we have to learn how to advocate for ourselves and for others. And advocacy is the heartbeat of the community. But the interesting thing about advocacy is that doesn't happen without awareness. So awareness can sound like a platitude, like, oh, we're creating awareness. Good, great, like we're a nonprofit creating awareness, right? But it's really the voice of that community that's here. It's one voice that is creating a very, very loud voice that is being heard by thousands of people. And that voice creates this flowering of awareness, and that awareness is the doorway to advocacy, because somebody is not going to take action without becoming aware first. So it may be that Maddi became aware of this event, this big paddle challenge, and so she found it interesting. There was something within her spirit that was aroused. But then she committed, right? And she came into it, and now she's meeting people here in Bimini. She's meeting people with cystic fibrosis. And so you can see how very quickly within our awareness, the advocacy can turn into action. And that's the power of the community. That's it. That's why the organization really doesn't exist without the community. The community is the mission. The community is the vision. The community is the voice, bottom line.
And so that leads me to one of the questions I had is, you have a mindset, is we live, we learn, we evolve. We try new things and we try to do better. Is that, do you see, in general, do you see that in like when you talk to someone, how many people have the same mindset? What, like, do you also need to work, like, is that a part of the community as well? Like, you're trying to bring awareness with cystic fibrosis, but it's also, are you bringing that? Do you see that? Like, do you see people evolving that way too? With a more positive mindset?
I think that the reflection of that evolutionary principle that we all have within us, in that attitude, in the mindset, you see everybody here has got it, right? But we're here, right? Everybody made the choice to be here. Everybody here is got that, as Chris Burdish would say, they've got the passion and the purpose You know, they're aligned, you know, in some way. Maybe not all in the same way, but in similar ways. There was a famous woman named Barbara Marx Hubbard who was considered like the mother of conscious evolution of our time. And she has this beautiful quote that I live by. And it's that when we step up to the big yes in our life, whatever that means, today or in this next moment, when we step up to the big yes in our life, the incarnation, the embodiment of divinity accelerates. So I think what we see here is a commitment, an embodiment of that big yes, whatever that is. This was one big yes. To cross that ocean is a big yes. And so it accelerates that evolutionary transformation. It accelerates the expansion, the openness, the courage. And it's beautiful because you could be maybe in a really, you know, a really contracted place, you know, isolated. But the moment you say yes, it goes.